Okay, let's dive right into some pretty shocking math that's driving a massive illicit boom right under our noses. Imagine there's a county in Northern California where a pound of weed sells for just $200 locally. But if you pack up that exact same pound and ship it out of state, it goes for $1,500. You're multiplying your money by 7 or 8 times just by crossing state lines. And honestly, this simple, staggering math is exactly why legalization did not kill the black market. Now, take a look at this number, $3.6 billion. That's billion with a B. What's crazy is that this represents just the low-end annual street value of illegal cannabis coming from one single county in California. We're talking about Siskiyou County, which churns out an estimated 7.8 million pounds of illegal marijuana every single year. And right now, pretty much nobody is stopping it. So welcome to our explainer on the legalization paradox inside California's multi-billion-dollar black market. You know, a decade ago, California legalized marijuana with a pretty simple promise: bring it out of the shadows, regulate it, tax it, and clean it up. But instead, as we'll see, a system designed to do exactly that accidentally provided the perfect cover for a dark, completely unregulated global underworld. Let's start with Section 1, the black market boom. We're going to move down to ground level and see what a massive illegal raid actually looks like in Siskiyou County today. I promise you, it is a completely different reality than the slick, clean, regulated dispensary image we're also used to. Imagine being a sheriff's deputy out there. Law enforcement constantly arrives at these sprawling, garbage-strewn encampments just dropped right into this otherwise beautiful mountain scenery. I mean, the sheriff's office counted over 2,700 hoop houses in just one subdivision alone. But here is the catch. When the police convoy arrives, the sites are already completely empty. Spotters, who are sometimes armed with AK-47s, by the way, radio ahead. So deputies end up walking into a dusty camp with a few roosters, maybe a couple of stray dogs, thousands of plants, and literally no one around. So that brings up a really important question. What hazardous secrets are actually hiding inside those plastic walls? Well, before deputies can even step foot inside these makeshift greenhouses to investigate, they often have to tear the walls down. Why? Because the air inside is completely toxic. And this hooks directly into the terrifying reality of how these plants are being cultivated on the cheap. Which brings us to Section 2, toxic weed, toxic earth. The crucial focus here really shifts from illegal agriculture to what is essentially a literal hazmat situation. When they test these illegal sites, investigators have found 27 different pesticides. The workers out there use beer cans holding these sawdust-like packets of banned chemicals. They light them on fire and completely fumigate the plants with toxic smoke just to kill insects. Get this, 12 of these chemicals directly attack the human nervous system. They can cause seizures or even put someone in a coma. 7 of them are completely banned in the US. And shockingly, 17 of these chemicals aren't even tested for by California's own Department of Cannabis Control.
Actually, scratch that, it gets even worse. During raids on federal lands, authorities have found traces of carbofuran. This is a banned, highly toxic pesticide where just a quarter teaspoon is enough to kill a 600-pound African lion. Think about that for a second. These lethal chemicals, right along with raw sewage and huge mounds of garbage, are just being dumped straight into the soil. They are severely damaging the environment and leaching into creeks right next to endangered salmon spawning areas. It's creating a chronic, toxic mess that is incredibly hard to reverse. Now, you might be wondering how this affects you. Testing confirms that highly toxic, contaminated cannabis from Siskiyou County has been tracked directly to licensed dispensaries in California and Oregon. The legal market isn't some perfectly sealed system, so if you've ever bought cannabis from a legal dispensary and just assumed it was completely safe, well, you might be wrong. The black market is feeding directly into it, and the state's testing gaps are letting it slip right through.
So who actually has the power and the money to run a toxic operation on this massive scale? Let's pull back the layers and identify the criminal masterminds pulling the strings behind these isolated rural farms. Because trust me, this isn't the work of local mom-and-pop farmers. Let's find out in Section 3, the international syndicates. The reality we have to face is that this is no longer just a localized California issue. It has evolved into a highly organized global enterprise. According to the DEA's 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment, Chinese transcontinental criminal organizations now absolutely dominate this space. And they aren't working alone. Law enforcement has also busted networks run by Mexican drug cartels and even groups of Bulgarian nationals operating massive illicit grows on expired visas. These foreign networks are swooping in, purchasing massive lots of cheap residential land, leveling 100-year-old redwoods, and scaling up operations from California all the way to Maine. It all builds into this incredibly elaborate money laundering route. It's basically a massive shell game. First, criminals use fraudulent property deeds with straw owners, so when the police show up, nobody actually knows who owns the land. Then they make their sales out of state for premium prices. After that, they run the money through casinos and a massive underground banking system centered in New York City before finally sending the illicit proceeds straight back to mainland China. So, if these international syndicates are literally raking in billions of dollars, who is doing the brutal labor on the ground? We need to shift our focus down the hierarchy to the devastating human cost hidden within these remote operations. This brings us to a really dark reality. Section 4, modern-day narco-slavery. The rapid spread of these grow sites relies entirely on the severe exploitation of deeply vulnerable people. It is a system that local law enforcement bluntly and accurately describes as modern-day narco-slavery. We're talking about undocumented immigrants from China, Mexico, and Bulgaria who were lured to the U.S. with false promises of legitimate employment. Once they arrive, they are trapped. They sleep in tight plywood shacks in brutal, searing heat with absolutely no air conditioning. They have no vehicles to leave. The water supply hauled in for them is so contaminated they have to rely entirely on bottled water. And of course, they are kept in line by fear and armed guards. Sheriff Jeremiah LaRue summed it up perfectly when he said, quote, "Not everybody wants to be out here. Most of them don't want to tell us the full story. They're afraid." In one instance, Sheriff LaRue actually received a letter from someone who managed to escape in the middle of the night after being told they would literally be killed if they tried to leave. To make matters even more complicated, state sanctuary laws restrict police from asking about immigration status, making it incredibly hard to rescue the people trapped in this nightmare. All of this begs a massive, incredibly frustrating question. If there are toxic chemicals killing the earth, illegal guns, and modern slavery happening in plain sight, why on earth isn't the state of California completely shutting this down? Well, this brings us to the infuriating bureaucratic loophole that allows this crisis to continue unchecked. Let's look at Section 5, California's systemic failure. You know, the state of California is actually spending hundreds of millions of dollars to fight the illicit market. But as we're about to see, the legal framework itself has created a massive unintended blind spot. If we look at how state enforcement grants are distributed, the financial disparity is genuinely hard to believe. The state distributed over $350 million in Proposition 64 grants specifically to fight illegal cannabis. Humboldt County got expanded funding and actually did a great job cleaning up sites. But then consider Siskiyou County. They produced 17.8 million pounds of illegal weed, arguably the absolute worst black market problem in the entire state, and they received exactly $0. Why? Simply because the county bans legal retail storefronts, which makes them entirely ineligible for the state grant money designed to fight this exact problem. Without that critical funding, local law enforcement is just vastly outmatched. To put that into perspective, there are only about 150 state officers dedicated to cannabis enforcement for the entirety of California. Meanwhile, the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department is trying to cover 6,300 square miles mostly by themselves. It has become an endless game of whack-a-mole against international syndicates who, even if they do get busted, face little to no prison time and just move to a new location to start the whole process over again. So, to summarize this incredibly painful irony, how did legalization actually feed the shadows? Well, the legal framework meant to regulate the industry instead fortified the black market. It provided regulatory cover for transcontinental criminal syndicates to operate. It created massive testing gaps that allowed toxic, banned pesticides right onto dispensary shelves. It hamstrung critical enforcement funding in the counties that needed it the most. And, perhaps most tragically of all, it enabled the severe trafficking and exploitation of undocumented workers. This isn't just an agricultural or regulatory failure, guys. It is a severe public health emergency and a human rights catastrophe playing out right now in the California mountains. So I want you to really think about this paradox. If you participate in this market, what exactly are you consuming, and who suffered to grow it?